my name is Cynthia. Thank you for being here today. I will be sharing my research on Brazil's economic crisis during the 1980s. We will look at what caused the recession, how the government responded, and the economic school of thought that influenced their actions. So let's go ahead and get started. To set the stage, the 1980s were a tough time for Brazil. The country faced high inflation, unemployment, and economic stagnation. My main idea is that by understanding the causes of the crisis, the government's response, and the economic school of thought behind their decisions, we can learn valuable lessons about managing economic challenges. First, let's talk about the root causes of the recession. One major factor was Brazil's high foreign debt. By the late 1970s, the country owed about $50 billion to foreign lenders. This debt was mainly used to support rapid industrialization, which the military government at the time had prioritized. This heavy debt made Brazil very vulnerable to external economic shocks. Another key issue was political instability and corruption. The government mismanaged resources, leading to widespread frustration among the people. This lack of trust in the government made it even harder to address the growing economic problems. Now let's consider the economic failures. Brazil's reliance on foreign debt represents a market failure, which means there was an imperfection in the market mechanism that prevents optimal outcomes. The dependency that Brazil had on other countries made the country susceptible to shocks like the second oil crisis of 1979, which was caused by the Iranian Revolution. This resulted in inflation since oil prices rose from $13 per barrel to $34 per barrel in less than a year, making it difficult for the country to afford those prices. Additionally, the government's failure to manage political unrest only deepened social inequalities and dissatisfaction in the country. The Brazilian government misallocated resources to big businesses with claims to stimulate the economy, but the only benefit was their political gain, and it actually left the rest of the country worse off, highlighting the corruption that was going on during that time. Next, we'll look at the government's policy starting with the Cruzado Plan introduced by President José Sarney in 1986. The main goal of this plan was to stabilize the economy and reduce inflation. It included price controls, wage freezes, and introduced a new currency called the Cruzado. At first, the plan seemed to work. Inflation dropped significantly from 235.1% in 1985 to 65% in 1986. This caused public confidence in the government to improve. People began feeling hopeful that things were getting better. However, this initial success didn't last long. While inflation decreased temporarily, the fixed prices caused significant supply shortages. Producers couldn't afford to sell goods at the government mandated prices, leading to empty shelves in stores. By 1987, inflation had surged back up to an alarming 415.8%. This showed that the Cruzado Plan was not sustainable and didn't address the real problems facing the economy. Here, I went ahead and added a chart showing the inflation rates from 1978 to 1987. And we can also see how in 1986, inflation rates did drop significantly lower than they had since 1978 due to the Cruzado Plan. But even though they were good results during that year, it was only temporary compared to the inflation rate that skyrocketed the next year. In addition to the Cruzado Plan, the government implemented fiscal policies to reduce the budget deficit. This included cutting public spending on social programs to balance the budget and raising income taxes. Unfortunately, these cuts severely affected lower income communities that depended on social services. By reducing funding for healthcare and education, this meant that many people struggled to access essential services. This only added to the public's frustration and discontent with the government. During this period, Brazil's policies were heavily influenced by Keynesian economics, which emphasizes government intervention to boost demand. The idea was that if the government could stimulate spending, the economy would improve. However, the way these policies were implemented was not effective in the long run. For example, the focus on short-term fixes like the Cruzado Plan overlooked the need for lasting solutions to stabilize the economy. A purely Keynesian approach didn't adequately address the underlying issues, such as inflation control and the need for market flexibility. A more balanced approach that included monetarist principles, emphasizing control of the money supply, could have offered better solutions, such as allowing flexible pricing and focusing on social investments. So, what can we take from Brazil's experience? The key takeaway is that the economic policies implemented during the 1980s, particularly the Cruzado Plan, ultimately failed to address the main economic challenges. In hindsight, a more balanced approach that combined Keynesian demand-side measures with monetarist principles focusing on controlling the money supply could have been more effective. This would have allowed for flexibility in pricing and better management of inflation. In conclusion, the economic crisis in Brazil during the 1980s was primarily caused by high foreign debt and political corruption. The government's response, influenced by Keynesian economic thought, included policies that were well-intentioned but ultimately ineffective. To prevent similar crises in the future, it's important for policymakers to adopt flexible and sustainable strategies that truly address the root causes of economic problems. Alrighty, thank you all for listening. Now, if you have any questions or thoughts, please go ahead and comment, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.